Thank you very much for inviting me to address you today on this very important day. I first want to thank President Spoon and Vice President Keller, and mostly I want to thank all these promising, beautiful European youth assembled here today. Thank you for being there. When I was your age, I was a graduate, well, a little older than you. I was a graduate student in Paris, and I faced this very difficult choice of deciding what my dissertation topic would be on. I'm Canadian. I went back to spend the summer in Canada, and I had this long talk with my father, a very wise man, who told me that if you stand in the middle of a river with your hands open like this, you will never catch a fish. And it's only by closing your hands that you will be able to catch a fish and do something. I think that his wisdom is very helpful to help us understand what's happening with you here today. In order to be here today, you had to close your hands to get something. You find yourself today because you have been at a crossroad and you have made a choice. And this is a choice for a somewhat unconventional education, one that is practically oriented, and it puts you on a path slightly different from that chosen by many of your peers who are now starting their year, their academic year, at other more standard universities. Most likely this is a choice that has not been made in isolation. You made it in conversation with people who are meaningful in your life, in conversation with your parents, your siblings, your boyfriends, and your friends. So I want to open this day by congratulating you on this choice, because I think it is a very brave and visionary choice. Bravo to you. You can applaud yourself if you wish. It's not a small thing to choose not to take a conventional path. So in the days leading to this morning, you've been looking forward to this as a liminal moment in your life, a passage, a transition of significant importance. You stand on a bridge. This point here now is a bridge where you can look toward your past and your future at the same time. Looking at the future, you are armed with hope, with your imagination and your ideals. It's a sacred moment, a magical moment. Remember it and cherish it because it is very precious. Keep it as a point of reference for what is ahead of you, because you want to remember what you stand for. And in the future, you will need these references as you're trying to remember, as you're trying to find your personal coherence and your integrity as your social trajectory moves forward. I promise you there are moments in your life where you will want to find this 20-year-old and ask yourself, what was I about then? So this is the moment. Look at the bridge, look at where you are. A typical American speech on a day like this would be about the American dream. It would be about be all you can be, seize the day, carpe diem. Now, I'm a sociologist. I don't really believe in that. So my speech will be more about the intersection between the individual trajectory and biographies, the surrounding structures that enable and constrain those biographies and our action. This is sociology's, what enable and constrains, and how enables us to produce change, for you will produce change. And despite your limitation, you will be producing change as engaged citizen participating actively in a democracy. You choose to attend this university as engineers, teachers, and social scientists because you are committed to building the Europe of tomorrow in a proactive way, a more proactive way than many other students. You want to make a difference, and no doubt about it, you will. Armed not only with what you will be learning here, but also with this army of innovators, your peers, who have chosen a similar path. You will be a cohort, and you will be working together. This is extremely important, and together you will make a difference. So this is also a time when you've all been thinking about the kind of society you want to be part of. You don't only want to become a member of the middle or the upper middle class, making a good living and having a nice family. These things are very important, but you also want to put your energy into finding solutions to improve collective well-being. So let's reflect together on what kind of successful society you want to be part of, you want to help generate. Demographic shift is certainly part of the equation. Indeed, what better indicator of the quality of societies are there but life expectancy and low infant mortality? While many people across the planet might debate whether human rights are a universal indicator of the quality of life, I think very few would debate the value of low infant mortality and life expectancy as unquestionable good. So we can share this as a point of departure. But how can we explain variation in demographic outcome? If you read the New York Times or its various European equivalent, you will have noticed over the last few years that terms such as individual resilience, grit, are really creeping in. It seems to all be about our individual capacity to pull ourselves by our britches. I disagree. For the last 12 years, I've co-directed with the political scientist Peter Hall a research project on successful societies. And together with a group of colleagues from various disciplines, we have been meeting 3 times a year to discuss what are the criteria by which one would assess the relative success of societies. By what measure do we assess collective well-being? And this has led us to reflect on this concept of social resilience. We're interested not in a Superman, not in the exceptional individual who's able to raise against adversity, but really we're interested in the social conditions that create resilience, collective resilience. So we're looking at the resources that help individuals and groups meet the challenges that come their way. What are these resources? They are networks, identities, collective imaginaries, among others. So those are things that can actually be sustained socially. We're asking ourselves, how can these things, network, hope, collective imaginary, be reinforced? What are the institutions and cultural repertoires that can be activated in such a way that more people can prosper? So we have collectively created 2 books. The first one is called Successful Societies, How Institutions and Culture Affect Health. And the second one is called Social Resilience in the Neoliberal Era. And since we don't have much time, I'll just say a few words about the second book. Now, the neoliberal era. Many people think about neoliberalism as this dark cloud that has covered the planet over the last decade to make everyone's lives poorer and narrower, open to less choices. In fact, in our project, we think of neoliberalism as a syncretic process that opens and closes possibility. At the same time as the fate of workers in North America and Europe has been weakened and made more vulnerable by the spread of neoliberalism, we've had the explosion of market in Brazil, India, and China. We have a middle class that is consuming and growing in these countries. So it really opens and closes possibility. The first chapter of the book describes neoliberalism as a multi-level process that is mutually reinforcing, that involves the economy, the government, systems of regulation and accountability, and culture. At the economy level, we have the growing influence of market fundamentalism. The markets are increasingly the mechanisms that are at the center of the organization of social life. At the political level, we have tools that are put in place to help market mechanisms function in an unhindered fashion. At the administrative level, we have the creation of auditing tools. And finally, at the level of culture, you have a very deep transformation of shared definition of worth. in favor of a growing emphasis put on economic performance. So you have a narrowing of symbolic communities and solidarity, where a shared cultural model of what it means to lead a productive life has become defined in a much more narrow way. So as you can see here, I'm moving toward a much more critical view of neoliberalism, because one of the basic characteristics of successful society, I believe, is that it allows for the maintenance of plurarchies, of heterarchies of definition of what makes a worthy life. Okay? And one of the questions I would like to encourage you or invite you to ask as people who will be producing social change is, what can we do to ensure that people who are not middle class or people who are members of stigmatized groups don't think of themselves as losers? What are the cultural repertoire that can be sustained? I'll give you one example. A colleague at Berkeley, Irene Blumrad, did a study of how various countries perform on the multicultural index, how proactive are various societies in adopting bilingualism laws, in adopting all kinds of policies that symbolize to the members of ethnic minorities that they are a valued member of the society. Lo and behold, it has been found that societies that rank highest on this dimension are also societies where immigrants are much more emotionally and cognitively invested in the society, and also much more likely to want to run for office. They're much more involved politically in this society as well. So this is an example of social engineering that really makes a difference. When we think about inequality, people often think in terms of the politics of distribution. Over the last few years, many people have been writing about the politics of recognition. What are the tools that we have at our disposal to diffuse definitions of worth that are much more multidimensional and allow a larger number of people to feel that they're valued members of society? I wrote 2 books on the French and the American class cultures, one on the French upper and American upper middle class, titled Money, Morals, and Manners, the Culture of the French and the American Upper Middle Class, and one on workers, black and white workers and white and North African workers in Paris and in New York. And what I find is that both groups, the book was titled The Dignity of Working Man because in both contexts, workers drew fairly strong moral boundaries toward the middle and the upper middle class. In the French context, the workers drew much stronger boundaries toward the upper middle class, pointing to their ability, their own ability to be there for their friends, and not using as a hero, let's say, the equivalent of Donald Trump, but a much wider range of heroes that would also include people like Mother Teresa. These are good templates of what defines an ideal life. And why is it that in the French case, the workers were less likely to think of themselves as losers than their American counterpart? The answer was in part the availability of cultural repertoire in France that have now disappeared in the American context. The French would turn towards socialism, republicanism, Catholicism, which would lead them to lower the boundaries toward the poor. So the argument here is a little bit too complex to explain in detail here, but I want you to put this in your toolkit of ideas that you're going to be playing with as you try collectively to imagine better futures. In other words, the social changes can happen at many levels. Some of the answers are technical, some of the answers are cultural. We can create tools to activate different aspects of those social processes, and this is the task ahead of you. I'm finishing a project on how African American, Black Brazilians in 3 groups in Israel are responding to stigmatization and discrimination. In the case of the US, we have 500 interviews, and we find that in general, whereas the shared sense of the fate of the group is very much one that people feel that they are discriminated collectively, the answers are often individual self-improvement, turning toward gaining an education as a solution. Yet we know from the recent experience of the civil rights movement that collective self-improvement is really what has changed the fate of African Americans in very, very significant way. So this is the conundrum with which I will leave you today. What is the place of the individual in the collective as in the week ahead for you, as you think about how to create social change in Europe, how to face the challenge of demographic shift? What are the keys to social change that you're going to be able to activate? What can we do to foster it? So at the end of the day, the question to you is very much, what are you going to do? And there's this wonderful phrase that the American Army used to mobilize to recruit people. And the conclusion was, be all you can be. So I'm going to conclude today with simply this exhortation to be all you can be. Thank you.